It's hitting 90 today in DC. And tomorrow for the parade, it's supposed to rain.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Well, we have June gloom here, so I haven't seen the sun in a few days. Hey, we are live after the weather report that we just gave for Washington and Los Angeles. Welcome to the weekly roundup. It is Friday the 13th. It is June 13th, 2025. I'm David Dayen, the executive editor of The American Prospect. We do this every Friday. And with me today is Harold Meyerson, editor at large. Harold, how are you?
I am well. How are you?
That is good. I wanted to bring you on because you and I both have been writing a lot about the situation here in Los Angeles. Now, I live in Los Angeles. I'm here in Venice. And you are born and raised in Los Angeles and spent a whole lot of time there, and still have many connections to the city. And so we both have been covering this in our own way. You from 3,000 miles distance, and me, at some of the protests, at some of the various gatherings that have been going on. And, I mean, maybe we could start by just talking about, um, kind of the impetus for these protests and maybe some of the background. You in one of your pieces talked about how the roots of uh, local resistance to immigration enforcement cooperation with federal authorities goes back a half century.
It does. The Los Angeles Police Department adopted a policy called Special Order 40 in 1979.
Mm-hmm.
And this was under the police chief Daryl Gates, who was nobody's idea of a woke liberal or anything like that. And the order specified that the LAPD was not supposed to cooperate with any federal immigration authorities in matters of deportation. And the reason for that was that if immigrants who were undocumented had experienced a crime or had seen a crime, they would be afraid to contact the police because that carried with it the threat of deportation. And so, as a matter of simply being a better agency to investigate and deter crime, the LAPD said hands off any of that deportation stuff. So, and
And
that's
that's a big deal,
1970s.
1970s. And that's a big deal in a city that really is made up of immigrants. I mean,
Yeah.
we have a substantial population. It's a majority minority city. I talked this week to the mayor of Culver City, uh, and he told me that 70 languages are spoken at home in the city limits of Culver City. And that's, a pretty good indication across the board of what Los Angeles's makeup is like.
And Culver City has maybe what, 50,000 residents, and
Yeah, it's not a
it's
very
on the west
large, yeah.
side. It's on the west
This
side of LA.
isn't,
It's not
right. This isn't
a
even,
neighbor. It's not a neighborhood that people think of as being heavily immigrant populated, but all of LA virtually is heavily immigrant populated.
exactly, exactly. And so, if you're going to bring ICE raids into this region, you're going up against the fact of a heavily immigrant population and a local police force that is disinclined to work with you. And so, uh, both at both levels, you're going to get resistance to that. And
And
that's what we saw. Yeah, go ahead.
and you're going to get resistance not just from these dangerous radical Democrats or whoever, but it's worth pointing out that the LA Area Chamber of Commerce
Right.
deplored the deportations, And I just had a communication today from a friend in Ventura County, where there's a great number of migrant farm workers, immigrant farm
Right,
workers, saying that the Farm Bureau, which is probably the single most conservative political force in
right.
California, the Farm Bureau has been imploring ICE to call off the deportation. So,
Yeah,
you know, this is an activity that strikes at all levels of the California economy, at all levels of the California community.
absolutely. And we'll talk about, it sounds like Trump has made a bit of a shift as far as farm workers and hotel workers are concerned, but we'll get to that later. That's a good way to set the scene. And so when these raids started happening, it really started happening about a week ago, last Friday. Probably while I was on the weekly roundup here, down about 10, 15 miles from here in the fashion district of Los Angeles. There were raids of seamstresses. It was at that raid that a union leader, David Huerta from SEIU, California, was injured and detained and arrested. And that spilled into the next day when there were raids near a Home Depot in Paramount, California. Now, tell us about Paramount and tell us about sort of the reaction that was had here by immigration or by regular residents, I should say, to these
Paramount is one of
immigration
a
raids, of
series of
course.
cities that run through, through which the Long Beach Freeway runs. These are all relatively small cities, really inner-ring suburbs of Los Angeles that are almost entirely Latino in population, heavy immigrant populations in all of these communities, all very working class. At Paramount, when the deportations started outside a Home Depot, where there was a line of workers hoping to get picked up to do construction work,
Right,
motorists started honking. Now, this is to say your typical resident of Paramount didn't exactly approve of seizing workers who might have been their family members, their friends, their neighbors. So that was the initial reaction from, as it were, the base, from really the base of much of California's population and it shouldn't have been surprising that there was horror and pushback
right.
at that kind of ICE activity.
Yeah, it was funny. I ended up talking to someone at a Home Depot here on the West Side, and this was one of the day laborers. They were still out there. That particular Home Depot had been raided, but everybody scattered. They didn't catch anybody. But the guy was telling me he's from Paramount. This day laborer lives 4 blocks from where the unrest was in Paramount, but he comes to this Home Depot because that's where he works, as it were. My understanding is at least three Home Depots, one in Inglewood and one in Huntington Park, as well as this one on the West Side, have been hit by ICE agents and officials. So
And
anyway,
Huntington Park is again one of those cities like Paramount that's on the
yeah,
east side, entirely Latino, heavily immigrant population.
that's right. And Inglewood is largely, although it's seen historically as African American, it also is very Latino now.
Right.
So uh, uh, this caused a lot of outrage. There were protests, and that is when Trump decided to federalize the California National Guard and bring them in. This was not asked for by the mayor, by the governor, by the LAPD. And they weren't given until more recently, weren't even given anything to do. When I was down in downtown Los Angeles on Monday, I guess their nominal task was to guard federal property, and that means the federal building, the Roybal Federal Building in the Civic Center area downtown. Uh, and by guarding it, they were just sitting around in front of the federal building when the LAPD had a phalanx of officials, officers that were in front of them. So they weren't guarding really anything as opposed to hiding behind the LAPD. Um, uh, so that's one thing I want to point out. The
And,
second thing
and
I want
and
to point out,
really
yeah, go ahead.
deploying them was simply a political statement by Donald Trump
Right,
that sought to, I mean, in the context of complaining about riots, which didn't exist at that point,
right.
really trying to demonize the Democratic officials who had failed to call in, sufficient armed forces. So that's what that was about.
And another claim that I heard from a Homeland Security official is, oh, well, having these federal resources here frees up the LAPD to do other operations. When in reality, most of the LAPD was protecting the National Guard. They were like in front of they were using up resources. So that's one aspect of this. The other one, which you and I have both pointed out, is when you're talking about the area around the Paramount Home Depot and then downtown Los Angeles, the area around City Hall and the Civic Center, you're talking about maybe five, at the most 10 city blocks in the city and region of Los Angeles, which is a region of over 4,000 square miles. So, I mean, I should probably turn around my camera right now to show you that in my sector of LA, it is not burning. And has not been at least since January, since the fires in the Palisades. So there is this image that has been created mainly because of one incident with burning Waymo cars that has been repeated endlessly on social media. That the city is in chaos, the city is in crisis. The city is 99.9% of the city has had no effects of this situation.
And I was the political editor of the LA Weekly in 1992 when the riots
Right,
broke out after the cops who had beaten the hell out of Rodney King, which was then shown on television after they were acquitted. That was a riot. That extended uh, from South Central to downtown to parts of Koreatown.
right.
And in the reporting I did, both for the LA Weekly and for the New Republic, the cover story for them on the
Mm-hmm.
riots. There were whole sections of town that weren't touched by the riots, but where people set up barricades and fled to the beach communities and so on. There was almost kind of like a mass migration towards Venice and Santa Monica and the Palisades, David, where you
Oh,
live.
I'll tell you,
Yeah.
even more recently in 2020, during the George Floyd situation, uh, businesses around here in Venice were boarding up, and that is not the case right now. Everything looks completely normal as it normally would. So, I
Yeah,
mean,
this
you're
is
you're giving us kind of a crocodile Dundee, like that's not a riot, that's a riot
Yeah,
situation.
absolutely. I knew John Kennedy, and John Kennedy. This is no
There you go.
riot.
Right.
This is, as you said, endless airing of Waymo driverless cabs being set afire. In a very
And I
small
will
area
say
downtown.
the vast majority of the protests downtown, the ones I saw on Monday, and even continuing through the rest of the week, have been extremely peaceful. So I've witnessed a sit-in out in front of the federal building. It was led by clergy. I was at the rally to free David Huerta, and that was on Monday morning, and by Monday afternoon he actually was released, although he faces charges. That was punctuated by a house band and line dances. Later on in the day, I saw a semi trailer roll up with a full five-piece Tejano band playing Tejano music. The band is called Los Jornaleros del Norte. They are actual day laborers who go around and play, and in this case at a protest. There was a spirit of celebration at the Celebration for Heritage There's a lot of talk about flags and like how dare you fly the Mexican flag. Most of the flags actually I saw were hybrid flags where they had the U.S. Flag in half and then either Mexico or El Salvador or whatever the personal heritage is of the person waving the flag on there as well. It was, in my mind, there's certainly anger out there on the streets, but there's also this sort of determination that this is our city, these are our neighbors, these are our friends, these are our family members, and we're not going to be intimidated. We're not going to relent our free speech rights on the basis of this attempted, takeover or intimidation of the city.
This is a heavily immigrant city. They are distinctly Angelino. I mean, no one really knows what the flag of Los Angeles looks like. But if you mush all those flags together, that is conceptually at least the Los
Yeah,
Angeles flag. And they are as much a part of what Los Angeles is as, Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys of blessed memory.
right,
If Trump wants to roll back America uh, to before the great third wave of immigration, people wanted to roll back America once upon a time before the second wave of immigration in the late 1800s and early 1900s that led to the Ku Klux Klan resisting
right.
Catholics and Jews. So, a nation of immigrants, unfortunately, brings with it the possibility of a nation of xenophobes opposed to the immigrants, and
Right.
we're seeing a lot of that right now.
The obvious backlash. Now, I want to bring a few other things into the conversation. The first thing is that, as we have said, there's all this focus on a very small segment of downtown Los Angeles and the massive police presence. At one point earlier in the week, I saw like 50 protesters and a line of police cars that stretch for 3 city blocks in opposition to them. So there's this huge police presence downtown. It's tied up sort of all of the attention, the attentional resources of the city. But elsewhere in the city, there remain these raids. And I was at a car wash in Culver City on Wednesday that had been hit twice by ICE raids. Overall, 26 what are called car washeros, which are the car wash workers. 26 have been detained. Uh, Actually, it's 25 workers and one client who were detained. Not just at that car wash, but at other car washes around the city, including one in Inglewood. Only 4 of those people do we know their whereabouts currently. 22 of these people, we have no idea of their whereabouts as of Wednesday afternoon. And I talked to victims of what can only be described as kidnappings. You have these unmarked cars that come onto a scene. Out come people who are not dressed in any kind of formal gear. They're in plain clothes. They're in masks. They are picking people up without sort of assessing. They don't have warrants. They're not assessing their immigration status really in any way. They're picking up people who have brown skin and they're throwing them into these unmarked cars. They're taking them away and they're leaving no trace of where they are taking them. And I don't know how you call that anything but a kidnapping by by these federal forces. And I talked to people who told me about what was going on. It actually happens to be graduation week here in Los Angeles, and there are children whose parents were taken by these ICE kidnappings and who are graduating this week and whose parents will not be able to watch their graduation.
And
Um,
the LA Unified School District has alerted the school district's own police to be very careful about who they admit to these graduation ceremonies because obviously there are going to be a lot of immigrants, documented,
that's
naturalized,
right.
and undocumented, at those ceremonies. By the way, in the middle of the last decade, I wrote several prospect pieces about the carwacheros because the steelworkers were
That's
actually
right.
trying to unionize them. This was an initiative started by John Hyatt, who was at that point the chief of staff of the AFL-CIO in DC.
And we're successful, by the way. There are USW unionized car washes throughout Los Angeles. In fact, the one I was at in Culver City is a unionized car wash, and it was shut down because the workers there were afraid of being kidnapped.
Right.
And so you have a business that was normally a thriving business that is now shut down. And that's indicative of what's happening in a lot of these communities. If you go to Boyle Heights right now, or East Los Angeles, or areas with heavy concentrations of immigrants, particularly Latino immigrants, the streets are empty. The streets are, people are staying in their homes. One person told me about, there are people who are, assisting with getting groceries for other people who are afraid to leave the house. This is the climate of fear that has been created in Los Angeles. It's bad for the economy, it's bad for the community, and it's bad just for basic human rights to have these wandering gangs of federal kidnappers running around the city.
And this is why the whole narrative about relieving Los Angeles of these criminal immigrants is flipped on its head. The disruption to the community, the disruption to the economy, and the disruption to public safety is precisely by the forces who Trump et al. Claim are there to secure the community. They're actually disrupting the community, and that's why the Chamber of Commerce, the Farm Bureau, the conservative running for the next mayor of LA, Rick Russo, are
Right.
all decrying what ICE and the other agencies involved in deportation are doing. You cannot imagine a more disruptive and I should also add cruel change to the Los Angeles landscape.
And this came to a head yesterday at the federal building in West Los Angeles on Wilshire Boulevard, where Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Secretary, was giving a press conference where she said, among other things, that we're going to liberate Los Angeles from the socialists who run the government there, which is a really startling thing to say if you think about it, that we're going to take the elected representatives of a city and take the city over from them. And in the midst of this, Alex Padilla, a senator, who was already in the building. And by the way, to get into a federal building, you're already going through several layers of screening. Everybody in a federal building is a known entity. And in fact, federal officials, apparently FBI, escorted Padilla into that press conference yesterday. And he decided to ask a question while Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was speaking, and he was manhandled by I guess it was a combination of FBI and maybe Homeland Security officials, security. They pushed him out of the room, they threw him to the ground, and they handcuffed him. A sitting U.S. senator who did eventually say who he was, that he was Senator Alex Padilla. Eventually they did let him go. And I guess Padilla did talk to Kristi Noem afterwards. But in a press conference he held right after that all happened, he said, if this is how they're treating a U.S. senator, imagine how they're treating cooks, how they're treating seamstresses, how they're treating day laborers, how they're treating people on the streets of Los Angeles.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that Padilla subsequently made clear was that he had been trying to get a meeting with Kristi Noem for weeks to discuss what her agents were doing in the state of 40 million people that he represents in the United States Senate.
Yeah.
Having been thwarted in doing that, he found himself in the same building as Kristi Noem wanted to, have a Q&A session with her that she'd been denying him through regular channels.
Right. And two things, Padilla, number one, is the ranking member on the Senate Homeland Security and Government Affairs Committee for immigration policy. So he has the specific authority to look into this for the whole country, let alone for the constituents that he represents in California. And the second thing is that obviously I'm a constituent of Alex Padilla's. He is probably the most mild-mannered person, maybe in the entire U.S. Senate. He is not someone who sort of raises his voice in any way, and it's really fascinating to me how this administration is turning people who are not spotlight chasers, who are mild-mannered folks, people like Chris Van Hollen, who went down to
El
El
Salvador.
Salvador to look in on Kilmar Abrego Garcia when he was detained there. And Alex Padilla, they're turning them into these like resistance heroes in some way. And what it should show the rest of Democrats in the Senate and the House and anywhere is that there is no excuse for them not to get into this fight if the quietest people among them are willing to do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is each provocation produces some resistance, and the administration uses that to get to the next level of provocation. That's certainly what happened with the deployment of the National Guard.
And now the Marines, by the
And now the
way, and
Marines, right?
the
And
Marines have come in, I guess, to guard the National Guard who is being guarded themselves. But one interesting addition to this is that now we're starting to see National Guard members go out with ICE on these various raids, and that is something new that we haven't seen before. It's one thing for them to protect federal property, but in the name of protecting federal agents, you have military members on the streets in this city in the name of protecting federal ICE officials as they engage in activities. But this is the military on the streets of Los Angeles.
and essentially, in theory, to repel the kitchen staff of restaurants, the
Right.
cutters and seamstresses, and the day laborers from presumably pushing back when they're hauled off. I mean, you really that's an interesting use for the American military, to put it gently. And
Yeah.
as I've been writing, since we're coming up on the No King's Day, this really does echo the impetus to have formed the U.S. Army 250 years ago tomorrow to keep Americans safe from British troops doing that. We have the Neo-Redcoats at this point, reenacting, the community disruptions of the Brits in 1775.
And just to clarify what those protests are, there are these protests tomorrow, June 14th. It's in reaction to the fact that Trump has sort of hijacked this very modest celebration the Army was going to be holding on the 250th anniversary of their founding, which also happens to be Trump's 79th birthday. And he's going to hold a Kim Jong-il style military parade in Washington, D.C., which has talk about disruption. Not only is it millions of dollars, but my understanding is that federal workers have been told to go telework for the last 2 days because there is so much military hardware on the streets of Washington. And this is really amusing because one of the central things that the Trump administration did when they got into place was that they said everybody has to come back to work. But apparently that's not true. If you want to hold a birthday party for Donald Trump,
And
you can
also,
work from home.
they were bringing in federal troops, and they billeted some of them in federal offices, ousting the workers
Yeah.
supposed to come back to the offices. So there's that. There's also, the streets of DC were not paved to withstand tanks and armored vehicles. So
So there's going to be tens of millions of dollars in damage,
yeah, to create potholes.
potholes and
This is
things. And
a pothole utopia.
allegedly the Defense Department is going to pay for that, but who knows? I mean, every time Trump holds a rally, he stiffs the local community for any kind of cost incurred by it. And in this case, Washington D.C. is already in a terrible budget situation because of the House or the Congressional not reconciliation, but the continuing resolution to fund the government, which cut something like $1 billion from the Washington D.C. budget.
Right, right. So when Kristi Noem talks about replacing the socialists governing Los Angeles, the Republicans kind of have a pilot program for replacing local
Right.
government in D.C., which has never fully had home rule. And
Right. So anyway,
see
they're
what gets inflicted on us.
in reaction to this birthday party, this North Korean birthday party. We're seeing. I think there are something like 2,000 different protests that are going to be held in cities all around the country. We're kind of nationwide here in at the Prospect. We have people in Chicago and New York and L.A. and Washington and Boston and elsewhere. And so we'll probably bring you a roundup of some sorts on what happened in those various cities. So I expect it to be very large. I expect it to be in the millions. And, that level, that show of force has often, in other places, it's toppled authoritarian governments, but at the very least, it has, given them second thoughts about some of the things that they're doing. And we're already starting to see that. So I want to bring up this thing that I alluded to
Right.
before where Trump yesterday made a statement on his Truth Social website, uh, particularly about farm workers and about hotel workers. And he said that actually, what I learned is, I've been hearing from a lot of farms, and these farm workers have been there 20 years, 25 years, and they're good people, is what I heard. The world kind of renews itself every day in the mind of Donald Trump. And he said, we're going to do something to try to make sure that we're not disrupting these farms and also hotel workers who I guess he knows, considering he is a hotelier himself.
Well,
Um,
California is produces more agriculture, more food than any other state. Agribusiness is big here. Agribusiness has obviously been lobbying the White House, saying, "Hey, if you're going ahead with these deportations you've started, we're going to tank." And I suspect the major hotel owners, which Trump certainly knows. His buddies or fellow Las Vegas hoteliers have been calling him and say, what are you doing? So I suspect that the business side of the American employers have been calling him and compelling
which
him to
have
resign.
always historically been interested in
Right.
maintaining the situation as it is, mainly so they can exploit those workers, right?
Absolutely.
They want to
Abs
hire workers who have little recourse to go to the government to protect them. And so they can lower wages and make working conditions poorer and et cetera.
So the threat of deportation works to the advantage of those employers if their workers
Right.
actually want to raise. the
The reality of
execution of
deportation
mass
does not work.
deportation
Yeah, right.
totally screws them. So,
Right.
yes.
Two other things on this. Number one, there's kind of a funny sidelight to the notion that he's going to pull back on hotel workers. So ICE has been staying. These ICE officials, these agents, have been staying in Los Angeles. They've been staying in hotels, and you can imagine that word gets around where the ICE officials are staying. And so night after night, protesters have come outside the windows of the hotels that ICE agents have been staying in and making noise all night. That has been something that's been going on all week here in Los Angeles. And so there may be something where ICE itself is saying to Trump, hey, could you back off the hotel workers? Maybe we'll get some rest if we're able to do that. The second thing is that uh, you have to wonder whether Trump's directive or his Truth Social comment will actually filter down to the people who seem to be really directing this policy, which are Stephen Miller and Tom Homan, who's the czar, as it were, of immigration enforcement. I'm not certain that they're going to take those directives around farm workers and hotel workers as gospel, because they seem much more interested in hitting quotas than they are in respecting anything, even the wishes of the president.
There's been ample documentation of Miller in his very forceful fashion insisting that quotas be raised, that quotas be met, that agents be discharged if they do not meet their quotas. And, look, I mean, Stephen Miller is one of these guys who is not only doing this because he does whatever Donald Trump wants, but this is deep-seated within him. He wants to, if he could, deport everyone to the right of MAGA, to the left of MAGA, excuse me, in
Yeah.
this country. And, he really brooks no dissent or failure to meet his quotas. So, yeah, that is a
And
real
of
issue.
course, Stephen Miller is an Angelino. He
Yeah,
was
yeah,
born
West
and
Side
raised
Angelino, yes.
in Santa Monica. Went to Santa Monica High School. So the fact that this really came to a head here, it didn't start here. I mean, there have been raids all over the country, but the fact that it came to a head here is a bit not surprising if you know that history. Um, so yeah, I mean that's I think one of the big questions is what is the nature of these ICE raids? And now, actually, the second question around the National Guard and everything it's coming to a head because last night there was a federal ruling in a court case. You know, California immediately took the Trump administration to court to block their use of National Guard troops without the express permission of the governor. And a federal judge sided with California and said that the alleged emergency that's going on is not borne by the realities on the ground, and therefore the federalization of these troops is illegal. That injunction has been stayed now while this is appealed to the Ninth Circuit, and we'll see what happens. The three-judge panel, I believe, two of them are Trump appointees on that panel. They'll be hearing the case, and presumably this will go back to the Supreme Court, which, as we've seen, has alternately given light slaps on the wrists to Trump, or allowed him to engage in a lot of these
And it seems to
activities.
me that there are two questions to be resolved here. It is fairly clear, certainly if you look at American history, that there have been times when state National Guards have been federalized to do specific things. So there is certainly an abstract precedent for this. If, however, that was
Well,
in
but
response.
that precedent is not in the last 50 years. I
Right,
think the
right.
last two are Lyndon Johnson in 1965, federalizing the National Guard in the South to protect the desegregation of certain universities.
Right.
And number two, Richard Nixon using National Guard troops to deliver the mail during the 1970 postal workers strike. Those are the only other times.
Right, right. But in each case, the government made the case that there's a specific problem that federalizing the National Guard can address. And what the initial judge on this said is no, there's not a specific problem here.
Right.
We do not have an emergency riot situation, and so that has to factor in, one would hope, to how the courts view Trump's current federalization of the Guard.
Yeah, absolutely. And so obviously that court case is going to be playing out over the next days and months, but certainly it's a blow that that this has been struck down. And it's really an important part of this. Obviously, I'm focused on the impact on families, the impact on individuals who are suffering at the hands of these ICE raids, but there's a larger precedent at work here, right? When you're talking about putting military troops on the ground in American cities. And I should say that the executive order that was put out to enact this federalization was not limited to the city of Los Angeles. In fact, it mentioned no cities whatsoever. And we're already seeing some states like Texas and Missouri. They have sent their own National Guards into cities, and red state governors might do that. But we could certainly see from this executive order other cities having, other state governors having their National Guard troops federalized, especially if it gets sanctioned at the Supreme Court.
Oh, absolutely. And since we know it didn't take a hell of a lot, to put it gently, for them to deploy a federalized National Guard detail to Los Angeles, it doesn't follow that it's going to take anything more than that for them to deploy the National Guard to Lord knows how many other cities. And that has been the case in LA, would be pouring gasoline on what is still not a full-fledged fire. So we shall see where that goes.
Right. And I mean, you put these all together, you have troops on the ground in a major American city, you have a sitting senator manhandled. And the question for me is, what is it going to take for Democrats in Congress, the leaders of the party, to let people know that there's something unusual going on here? So in the Senate yesterday, Chuck Schumer stopped what the current business was and said, "I just heard about something that sickened me to my stomach. Alex Padilla was thrown to the ground, and we need answers on this." And then after that, the Senate resumed its business, which involved Democrats collaborating with Republicans on a crypto bill, where they needed the Democratic votes to pass it. And it was just a sort of 20-second respite of business as usual in the U.S. Senate. And I don't know how that is tenable anymore when we see these these stirrings of fascism, these stirrings of authoritarianism going on throughout the country.
Senators also have a unique capacity. It only takes one senator to really grind the Senate to a halt.
That's
And
right.
now that they've ground one senator to the ground, I would think the Democrats could say, "Hey, we are not going to go on as if nothing is happening here. We recognize a militarization of a civil society when we see it, and we're going
Yep.
to you know call a halt to that as best we can."
I'm reminded of Mitch McConnell's words after Barack Obama was elected. And he said, "We wanted to make sure that things were not bipartisan. We worked very hard to make things not bipartisan because we wanted to let people know that there was a great debate going on. If it was bipartisan, then people wouldn't get the sense that something was happening in Washington."
Which was
And
more more or less the same thing that Bob Dole said after Bill Clinton was elected. This has been the Republican playbook
A
for
hundred percent.
quite a long
And
time.
now, and I'm not suggesting that that has to be the case in all circumstances, but when you see what's going on the streets right now, and that the fact that Chuck Schumer doesn't have the same mentality, that we need to alert the public as to the unusual nature of governance in America right now, that he won't even disrupt his the crypto collaboration for 10 more than 20 seconds. I think I don't understand how you can compartmentalize these two things. And I know that there are some senators who went down to the well of the Senate last night and gave a bunch of speeches. But I'm talking about doing something like you're talking about, grinding the Senate to a halt.
Which actually the Senate was structured to enable senators to do. So
Right.
there, I mean, this shouldn't be that hard. I should also add that Chuck Schumer's predecessor as Democratic leader, Harry Reid, who had been a prize fighter in his younger days, might not have responded quite the way that Chuck
I
Schumer
agree.
did.
I agree. He had a much better sense of the tenor of not just the Democratic base, but the public at large.
Yeah.
And if there were these kinds of activities taking place under his watch, I think the late Harry Reid would have reacted very differently.
Yeah.
All right, we have about 15 minutes or so left. We could continue to talk about this, but also there is, the matter of this giant mega bill that is lurking in the background. It has passed the House of Representatives. It is now in the Senate, where they are just preparing to release the final pieces of text. The Senate Finance Committee. The Senate Finance Committee has control over the vast majority of the most controversial items in this bill. They control the tax system. They have jurisdiction over the tax code. So all of the tax measures, and that includes the clean energy tax credits from the Inflation Reduction Act, they're in Senate Finance. And they also have control over the healthcare measures, and that includes the Medicaid cuts that are in this bill. And so if you're looking to what the bill actually does, the Senate Finance Committee is a good place to start. And what I've been able to learn is that there could be text dropped as soon as today showing what the Senate Finance Committee is going to do. But we also learned this week, and the Senate Finance Committee is going to change some stuff that the House did, particularly around the state and local tax deduction, which is something that high tax states and wealthy people in those states, they benefited from being able to deduct state and local taxes. It was capped to only a $10,000 deduction by the Trump administration in the first Trump tax cuts of 2017. And members from New York, New Jersey, and California want to change that and raise it. And in the House bill, they raised the deduction cap to $40,000. And in the Senate, when you're talking about California, New York, and New Jersey, those are all Democrats, right? So there are no real senators on the Republican side who are defenders of this policy because it doesn't affect their constituents anymore.
Whereas there's a crucial, small but crucial number of Republican House members who do represent districts in
That's
those
right.
states where their constituents would be affected. So there's a real difference between House and Senate within the Republican Party on
A
this.
real difference there. And combined with that is that senators wanted to do certain things like making certain business taxes permanent, whereas in the House bill, they were only available for 5 years, certain business tax deductions, tax
Right.
breaks for businesses. So the problem that the Senate has is they wanted to do more tax cuts. They also wanted to cut the overall cost of the bill. And there's nowhere else that looks better to go than the $370 billion over 10 years that raising that cap on the state and local tax deduction is. So they're going to slash that back so that they can afford to put in these additional business tax cuts. And that small but mighty contingent in the House is not going to like that. Similarly, they want to they want to extend the timelines for when the clean energy tax credits stay in place from the IRA, because a lot of those, as you've been writing about, happen to be in red states, where senators from those states are they have a vested interest, and so they want to extend those timelines, because right now in the House, that version says if you're not under construction within 60 days of the enactment of this bill, you lose the tax credit. And that would just create absolute chaos. It would destroy the clean energy industry in America. And the Senate wants to extend those timelines. Now, this happens to be the only big thing in the bill in the House version that the Freedom Caucus got. They got tighter timelines for the phase out of the IRA, which they want phased out entirely. They want to just end all of these clean energy investments that are in the IRA. So on both ends, you have the Senate making changes that were the non-negotiables of certain factions of the House. And that's going to be sort of where the tensions are on this bill.
With the tax credit issue, this is sort of an echo of the way Pentagon spending used to pass with vast majorities, because there was always a defense facility in each state and each congressional district. Well, the Biden IRA enabled factory construction to boom again in the United States, and factories are going up in states and districts. And in the same way, it kind of gives people who would otherwise want to cut this stuff significant pause. And so that's one factor we're seeing, as you just outlined, really kind of complicating the Republican march towards enacting this bill.
Now, wherever that kind of lands, and I feel like cutting taxes and taking money from vulnerable people is kind of the Republican MO. So that will land
Yes,
somewhere
yes.
in the middle, right? Um, so wherever it does, act on regular people is pretty clear from this bill. And we actually got this week a number of analyses of the House version of the bill. And I don't think the Senate version is going to be all that different. And this is from the Congressional Budget Office, but also outside independent macroeconomic budget experts. And it's really quite incredible. So if you look at the change in after-tax income, the distributional change as a result of this bill, if you are in the lowest 10%, you will lose 4% of your income as a result of this bill. That's about $1,600 on average. That is a recession level of income loss for the lowest, the poorest members of society. If you're in the top 10%, you're going to gain 2.3% as a result of this bill. And if you add in the tariff changes, which operate as taxes, regressive taxes,
Sales taxes.
sales taxes in a fashion, everybody loses from these Trump policies. The bottom 80% of the income distribution get poorer as a result of these policies, and only the top 20% do well as a result of these policies. So it's one of the starkest distributional changes, I think, in U.S. history in terms of fiscal policy. It's
Oh,
really incredible.
there's a 1920s song predating the New Deal, obviously, "Ain't We Got Fun," in which the line is "the rich get rich and the poor get poorer," and that's the theme song of this Republican funding structure.
That's right. And you know, it's been hard to gain a lot of focus on the big beautiful bill. We've been doing a newsletter almost every day, getting the word out, called Trump's Beautiful Disaster, and you can sign up for that at prospect.org. But it's been hard. And, when you have the military in the streets of a large US city, it's hard to get focus on, the wonky things happening in Washington. But the impact on people's lives, I mean, we haven't even mentioned that as a result of the bill, because of the changes in Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, 11 million people are going to lose their health care. And if the premium support, the additional tax credits that were put in under they were put in under the American Rescue Plan and then in the IRA, they expire at the end of the year. If they go away, another 5 million people are going to lose their health care. So again, as a result of Trump policies, you have 16 million people who are going to lose health coverage. And an analysis by researchers at Yale and the University of Pennsylvania said that and other aspects of the bill translate into 51,000 people per year dying because of this bill. And, I know that it's hard to get focus on some of these wonky fiscal things, but we're not talking about, just sort of a minor inconvenience. We're literally talking about life and death.
And that's been highlighted chiefly only by Joni Ernst's great comment that we're
That
all
we're all going
going
to
to
die.
die. Yes,
Right.
that actually, to a certain degree, helped publicize that
It
Yale
did, but it
University
was
of Pennsylvania.
temporary because human
Yes, yeah,
attention and attention in politics is so fleeting.
indeed.
But I really want to emphasize that, like, this is serious stuff, and it's coming to a head over the next few weeks. And obviously, we're going to continue to cover it and continue to raise awareness of it. Um, uh, there are these tensions within the chambers of the House and Senate, and those could delay the bill and give opportunities to raise the unpopularity of it, which it is unpopular. I mean, we've seen the polling on this, that this bill is desperately unpopular.
And the
Um,
Trump's tax cuts of 2017 were unpopular.
in
Which is
fact,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. In fact, Trump, his lowest approval ratings were directly after passing the 2017 Trump tax
yeah.
cuts. That was when he was at his lowest ebb as president, and so it should say something. Now, these low approval ratings haven't deterred Republicans from doing what they want to do to this point. And I'm reminded that the New York Times took this full takeout section of Don Bacon, who is a conservative Congress member from Nebraska,
Omaha.
a district that Biden won, and Kamala Harris won as well. And he said, "I'm breaking with Trump. I can't do all this crazy stuff. I'm not going to be caught up in this." He voted for this bill, the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, and earlier this week he voted for the rescission package, which was money that was already appropriated by Congress that Trump sent back and said, "We don't want to use this." Mostly it was foreign aid and a little bit of public media funding. And after saying, Bacon, that he is not going to support that, he went ahead and voted for it anyway. So, Republican moderates always cave. It's a version of the taco situation, only it's for Republican moderates and Republicans of other kind. They have lined up behind Trump, and they are marching into the sea with him on these various bills.
Well, let's hope that they continue a lemming like I mean, without the
I mean, I
consequence
don't
of a
hope for
real
it because it's going
people.
to be terrible for the country.
Right, right. But
It might be good politically.
politically, this is not a proven path to success. That much is clear.
Well, that's 100% clear.
Yeah,
But there's going to be real damage here, and so you have to weigh the
right.
potential political benefits against the mortal harm that is going to face people if these provisions go into effect. So we're going to continue to cover that at Prospect. We are just about out of time. I want to thank you, Harold Meyerson, editor at large at The Prospect. I'm sure you're going to be continuing to monitor all of these situations and more. We are here every Friday at 12:30 Eastern. We put an archive of these videos up on our website at prospect.org, so you can tell your friends if they missed it, that that's where you can go to watch it. And we will be back here next week. So thank you very much, and have a great rest of your afternoon.